well comparable to what Poussin did, and also Philippe de Champaigne.
One thing that comes to my mind is Van Loon and even Koberger a little bit. That's
Yeah, yeah.
And Philippe de Champagne is a Fleming.
Yeah,
So
he was born in Brussels.
I think one thing that's happened with the field of Flemish painting in general, it seems to me, is that Rubens and Van Dyck and the Bruegels overwhelm everything, and the Van Loon, these are the major painters at court and big stories at the time, and she seems close to that somehow.
Yeah, stylistic connections with Theodore Van Loon, for example. Van Loon painted his most important cycle of paintings. So it's very hard to let's say, to retrace or to reconstruct her biography, as it is for the biography of his brother. So it's my intention. I was given a sabbatical for the first time in my life until January now, and I will try to do more research in the Brussels archives, because, because we know so little. It is extremely frustrating, and also from a scholarly point of view, disappointing that you only can come up with some presumptions and suggestions. So I hope to find out more, and especially I hope to find something about, concerning the place where, for example, her brother received the training. Yeah, it's the same for Ariadne. Yeah, some of my colleagues, he said maybe she's to be identified as Ariadne, but this does not make sense either.
Kind of Troni's turned head in the
1950s. I think it's possible.
I just want to interrupt, because this was exactly the point I was going to raise. The source of those early portraits of generals is Titian. It's a series of emperor busts that for the Duke of Mantua, they're now lost, but in the 1630s had already been reproduced, the entire series, by Sedler in prints. And Rubens also. So, I mean, it was virtually a citation. So I think that we have to keep in mind the Italian sources through prints and through, I don't know whether she could see Rubens, but she certainly would have known the Sedler print.
But not for all of them. It's a point of reference, but it will be my pleasure to look at it.
One interesting thing to me in the context of women, the idea that it seems to me that for a high-end court figure like the Archduke Leopold William, bringing someone like her under his wing is a way of showing his power too. You protect the marginal or the odd cases, and then they're free to operate if they're under your protection, and that is a way of displaying power also in a way. And I would say I don't necessarily see him being surprised by what she came up with in the end, because of this idea that it still happens today. You can see it in many aspects in society. Because of my power at the time, the power coming from the court, I can protect that which is marginal, and it can exist if it's close to me, and that shows what I am.
Thank you. I did not see it in that way, but you think he would not have been surprised?
I don't have any reason to think either way, really. I don't know why he would have been in the context of what kinds of paintings were visible at the time, but I don't see why, especially so.
Do we know anything? I mean, after that painting, is there a continued relationship with Leopold?
No, not as far as
So it ends with that painting.
For example, but you know everything about Clara Peters. Yeah, a completely different profile, no?
Yeah, we don't know anything about Clara Peters, unfortunately. Yeah. But we don't have any reason to think she's close to court or protected, because if she would have been, someone would have mentioned it. And I think the figure that you told us about, which is fabulous, I can see we should go out and buy some of her works. They're going to go up immediately in price. But I think she's a classic case, and as far as we know, of protection by noble family or by closeness to someone in power, and that allows her to be what she is.
The strange thing is also that
Wilhelm's reception of that painting, I also wouldn't say that he was surprised. A very intentional paraphrase going on here and reinterpretation. And the Heemskerk painting, which is essentially the procession of Bacchus returning from India, the meaning of that, obviously, is transfer of cultural codes and civilizations. So what we're talking about is following of Bacchus, the creative impulse, bringing of culture, and then Wilhelmina puts herself as one of the followers, paraphrasing Heemskerk, yet she distances herself, so she's doing a free-form interpretation of Heemskerk in her own way, refiguring in a certain way. So I think that there is a very sophisticated play going on rather than surprise on part of the patron. So that's what I saw there in the relationship. But I also wanted to ask Alejandro, or regarding your mentioning of the Sine Serere and Bacco Frigate Venus, that last painting that you brought into the discussion, I think it works very, very well with the nymphs and satyrs. And would you really think that, in a way, Rubens is providing us with a new understanding of that expression? Because that was painted by so many people around 1600, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I think it's good to tie it into that tradition. Indeed, it's an image that has been used. I think what's great about Rubens is how naturally he seems to, these things are about the flow of these feelings in life, and it seems very natural to him. I should add that we're not sure what that picture looked like originally. The research being done now in Antwerp, it has later editions, and I'm not sure where that has ended, how much of that picture is original and how much it's not. It's a very didactic painting about his intentions, and I think it's interesting when looking at Rubens as a painter of mythologies to see that the mythological tradition is one that allows for drivers to innovate and to be creative. If you read from Hesiod and Homer onwards, it's not one of an accepted truth that is repeated, but rather of reinterpreting what people have said. And I think Rubens sees himself very much in that light, and he's keeping it alive by retelling stories with his own points to make in a way. But it's one of his most didactic paintings to my eye. It's not as beautiful as the painting downstairs, which really is one of Rubens's most beautiful paintings to me now. But it's a very that picture really explains what these things mean to him. And it's a very beautifully poetic idea.
So both of your papers in very interesting ways talked about sort of rare examples, the female artist painting the nude in the 17th century, but what we have not talked about at all is love. And in this whole discussion of the nude, and we think so much of sex and lust and what you should look at and what you shouldn't look at, we've actually talked about love. And I wonder if you could speak a bit more about that, because we'll talk more about love. Is this something that, who knows what Philip thought when he looked at these paintings, but is this something so specific to the way he would, maybe Rubens painted them, the way he would have seen them? Would other contemporaries have really experienced or responded to this idea of love?
Well, I think several answers to that. One, Philip IV is born in 1605, so he's a kid, he's a youngster. He's into these things naturally, especially at the time. At the same time, he's versed in ancient poetry and in ancient culture the way all these people are at the time, and I think to him it's only natural to see these things through these codes, it seems to me. Philip IV writes letters. I think, Hilliard, you mentioned one of them, or one of you did. Maybe it was you, I think. I'm not sure. Writes letters later in life, in the late 40s. He kind of turns and he says, the defeats of the Spanish army are explained by the lack of morals in my early life. And he says, in order to have God favor us, we need to change our behavior, country and me personally. He writes this, and he really goes in this correspondence with his nun, with Sor Maria de Agreda, and it becomes a very specific, almost remorseful, once again. I mean, St. Ignatius is another one of these stories. It's a great thing. You can be really bad as a youngster, and then you can kind of, through remorse, be saved. And Philip IV clearly goes through this transformation, and he looks at these things from the future as part of an immoral past in his life. Yet these things remain hanging in the palaces and so on. And it's not until the 18th century that King Charles III suggests that they all be burned. And you know, one of the court painters at the time says, let's not burn them, let's keep them for artists to study. But I think you know, I personally, I think one of the things that one learns from Rubens is a very frank, very well-balanced, and very complete idea of love, which is one that is informed by pre-Christian ideas coming from classical antiquity, without Christian guilt and without Freudian, you know, scientific understanding, but rather, you know, on the reins of myth-telling. I find it to be a real contribution to life and to understand these things through Rubens and through him to end up in reading ancient sources.
One of the basic points
I think it's important. I think we can only convey that in writing, or you know, in the quality of writing or speaking, which is how these things overlap. And the result of overlapping is the complexity of life. And if we kind of dissect it in different sections, we're just not being able to convey things in all their complexity.
We might have
Rubens does have writings, he has letters, but basically they're descriptions meant to convey to a prospective client what he has. So we don't have a lot of poetic descriptions, but we do have, in the case of Rubens, descriptions of how they learn as children, and they learn in ways that were not so strange really in Europe until 2 generations ago, which is by being able to understand oneself through quoting ancient authors. And you understand the idea of loss, for example, by quoting Horace or whoever it is, and you understand the idea of love or happiness or joy by quoting ancient authors. And you learn to do this by memory to a point where you're able to do this all your life. And I certainly was not part of that anymore, barely, but I wasn't in Europe. But it had been that way for a very long time, and we have good friends of Rubens are being taught by Justus Lipsius especially, and this is the way they learn about life. It's by quoting the great authors of antiquity who have explained what each one of these feelings is, and it's a wonderful way of understanding the self. It's the, you know, pre-Freudian, of course, and pre-personal psychology, but I think that would be the answer. You do have Rubens, for example, when he loses his first wife, instead of saying, you know, I'm so sad or I'm so sorry, he quotes ancient authors who express themselves at similar moments, and that's what he's doing. So I think you can weave enough material to have a sense of them really feeling in a way that's very similar to ancient poetry. In the case of Rubens, of whom we have a lot of correspondence.
Patient's letters are mostly about money. But you have descriptions around him. He had a beautiful estate. It was an estate in Venice, going out with overlooking the Murano, and great scholars. We have a fabulous letter describing a sort of dinner party with Sansovino, Aretino, a grammarian from visiting from Florence as his book was getting published, and so on. He describes afterwards this wonderful dinner and sitting around listening to music, discussing the arts and ancient writers. So even if you don't have directly from Titian's letters, it gives you at Titian's house. It gives you an idea of the ambiance.
So I think that concludes our afternoon. So thank you all. Thank you to our speakers. Coming.